Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. A Pelta Class Star Destroyer is a fearsome machine when it flies overhead. It's more of a small city with an airport than just a normal capital ship. An Pelta Class Assault ship is also an awe-inspiring sight. With its voluminous interior, it can deliver an entire legion of clones to any battlefield in short order, with all other vehicles and supplies as well. The appearance of a ship this large can change the momentum of any battlefield, and therefore these vessels were prized by, Jedi commanders and admirals. But these were operational level assets, massive ships crewed by thousands of sailors full of entire planets worth of resources. And one definitely felt their presence as they flew over ahead. It was probably a very awe-inspiring and also surreal moment for just your ordinary citizen on the ground to see. But it's also an overwhelming experience. There's a sense that whatever these massive warships are up to, they're far too busy to help the average individual through whatever ordeal they're going through. If anything, one becomes afraid that they'll be caught up in the crossfire as these massive ships duel each other in orbit, like gods in the heavens. These massive ships, crewed by military men, don't have the time to examine the collateral damage they create. They're too busy with their strategic goals to be concerned about the suffering of the average individual. And so the savior of the common man and common woman came in a much smaller and much more humble package. The Pelta Class Frigate. At 282 meters in length, this ship is roughly the size of a modern cruise liner, which is really the opposite of small in our world, but that just kind of gives you the scale of how large the Star Wars galaxy is. The word Pelta most likely comes from the ancient Greek term peltas. This is a type of soldier, a skirmisher used by Hellenistic armies. Skirmishers usually deploy in the flanks of the main force or precede the main infantry body during an advance. They usually exchange ranged weapons like javelins and slings with enemy skirmishers or harassed enemy infantry positions. These were lightly armed and lightly armored troops who depended on mobility and maneuver to harass their enemies. The main goal of a skirmisher was not necessarily to destroy enemy formations, but to disrupt them, to harass them, make them disoriented, so that when they are under attack by your own infantry, they're going to be a little bit more disorganized. Peltas were also used to hold positions with uneven ground, high ground locations like passes. They're also used as scouts. Now, the Peltas specifically carried a shield known as the Pelta, which is where they get their name. A Pelta was a very light shield, usually made from goat or sheepskin. All in all, this is a really good name for the Pelta Class Frigate because this was also a relatively lightly armored and armed ship that was quite mobile, and it was used in a lot of ways for defensive purposes, just like a shield would. The Pelta class would be considered a small to medium-sized ship. It's designated as a frigate, making it an escort class vessel. And it's also rated as a cruiser in some examples, which gives us an idea that this ship is designed for longer distance endurance missions. Now, at first glance, judging by the long narrow body and the location of the engine towards the rear, that this is just another blockade runner created by Carillion Engineering Corporation. But actually, all throughout history, CEC has had a lot of admirers and individuals who kind of copied what they did. I mean, take a look at this dynamic class freighter from Core Galaxy Systems. Remind you of anything? The Pelta class is really just another Carillion Engineering clone. And it's not designed by CEC at all. It's actually designed by Quadrive Yards, which is more famous for its large triangular-shaped dreadnoughts and star destroyers. Of course, when the Pelta was designed, there really wasn't a market for gigantic battleships and destroyers or things that Quadrive Yards usually made. And that is because this period of time was known as the post-Rusan Reformation. The galaxy had entered an era of peace and prosperity. This created an environment that was perfect for investment, exploration, and expanding the boundaries of the Republic, which of course created a boom in the civilian and commercial shipping industry. At the same time, the Rusan Reformation also demilitarized the Galactic Navy, eliminating overnight one of the largest customers for warships in the galaxy. There are also tons of restrictions on how many warships you could build, how large they could be, how many turbo lasers you could place on them, what kind of hyperdrive you could put on them. They really made it hard to design killing machines. Basically, the galactic dividend was a real thing, and every system wanted to join. Everyone wanted to exchange their blasters and vibro blades for hydro spanners, which is usually a good thing. The Pelta Class Frigate was designed during this period and not to fit the needs of the Grand Army of the Republic, but of the High Republic economy. With large state-backed infrastructure programs opening up communications and stabilizing hyperspace routes in the Outer Rim, there's a lot of demand for new exploratory, supply, and security ships. Now, usually bulk freighters are your best bet for moving large amount of supplies from one system to another. We've done tons of videos on ships like the Lucrehulk or the Munificent Class Star Frigates, and what you'll see with these types of ships is either massive interior spaces, like with the Lucrehulk, that can accommodate entire armies of droids, or large external hardpoints like what we see on the Munificent Class Star Frigates, which allows a ship to collect containers externally. Both of these shipping solutions are designed to maximize profitability, maximize how much you can place on a ship. But these type of bulk freighters are really not known for their quality in design or manufacturing. Again, it's all about cost savings. And the problem with the Outer Rim, which the High Republic was expanding into, was that it was kind of like the Wild West. There were bandits all over the place, pirate kings. It was just kind of a messy place. The cluster of civilization and planetary defense forces in the core regions have made it relatively difficult for these type of criminal elements to survive, but in the Outer Rim, the situation was completely turned upside down. The criminals were in charge. The Pelta Class Frigate reflects this reality and this environment. It was a starship that was built to handle all different types of situations. And so when you go on board of this ship, you won't just find a large storage compartment taking up most of the ship like a bulk freighter. Instead, you're going to see multiple compartments inside, including extensive housing for passengers as well as freight. When the inside of your ship is broken up into smaller compartments and it isn't just one massive space, it does give you a little bit more structural integrity. And if there is a breach in the hull, you can isolate the breach to just one part of the ship. This is a common design feature on most military ships, and this is also one of the reasons why the Venator and Lucrehulk were kind of known for being terrible in close-range battles, because all it takes is one or two glancing shots, and you're venting a massive hangar. But anyway, back to the Pelta Class Frigate. Unlike bulk freighters, which usually have a dozen or a few dozen crew members, the Pelta Class has a full combat crew of around 900 officers and crew members. Now, many of these crew members were assigned to taking care of the passengers on this ship. The Pelta class could carry anywhere from 200 to 1,000 passengers on board, depending on how it's outfitted. The ship was also equipped with a relatively thick and armored hull, which can be upgraded for more military action. It also came standard with plenty of point defense weapons to, fend off single-seat fighters. And in case of an emergency, there were up to 16 different escape pods on the ship as well. With the Class 2 hyperdrive, the Pelta Class Frigate could quickly move supplies from the core to the peripherals, and once in system, we again have that massive thruster in the back pushing the ship like a blockade runner. So initially, the Pelta class was marketed as a lightly armed and armored transport that brought colonists and important goods to support the High Republic's expansion into the Outer Rim. You're not going to carry as much as a bulk freighter, but then again, a Pelta class frigate is not going to need an escort, and that is going to be a huge cost saving by itself. The designers fully intended this ship to handle most situations on its own. Now, Quantdrive Yards actually takes advantage of the Pelta class's initial success and popularity. They designed 3 different variants. You have the standard Pelta class frigate, which is the jack of all trades variant, which we keep talking about. Then you have the Pelta class transport frigate. They basically remove the modular interior and replace it with one large storage area, so it can kind of work like a bulk freighter if necessary. And then finally, we have the famous Pelta class medical frigate. In this variant, you basically convert the inside of this ship into a state-of-the-art hospital. This variant became especially popular during the Nile conflict. Several of these medical frigates were used like mobile hospital units for worlds that were heavily affected by the conflict but didn't have any medical services available. The Pelta class's relatively formidable defenses, along with its modular interior, made it ideal for this role. It was this variant that really helped the Pelta class become a standard for Republic relief missions. And so now, whenever there was a natural disaster or a bandit raid that takes out an entire colony, usually the Pelta class medical frigate was the first Republic ship on site, providing relief in the form of aid and supplies, and even taking very sick and wounded individuals on board and housing them there until they heal. So as you can see, before the Clone Wars even started, the Pelta class medical frigate had already begun to build a name for itself. During the Great Hyperspace Disaster and conflict with the Nile, several Pelta class medical frigates were pushed to the forefront of the conflict, and they outperformed expectations. Soon, the other Pelta class frigates were also adopted for relief missions to transport food and goods to planets that needed help. And so for a period of time ranging several decades, the Pelta class's silhouette became synonymous with the Republic's goodwill and good intentions. You'll be surprised what good a small little care package that costs just a few credits can do for the Republic's soft power and its image amongst the galaxy. Giving aid and relief is really one of the best ways to secure trust with the populace. Now, when the Clone Wars started in earnest, there was a shortage of hulls, especially larger capital ships. We've talked extensively about the Venator class and Acclimator class in previous videos. These were completely untested combat platforms, and so deploying the Pelta Class Frigate became kind of a no-brainer. And alongside the Consular class cruiser was one of the most common ships used by the Republic Navy in the early days of the conflict. The standard Pelta Class Frigate would be upgraded into the Pelta Class Strike Frigate. Now, if you take a look at the rear engine area of a Pelta Class Frigate, there are actually two wings that can open up, revealing more space where additional thrusters can be placed. This type of modularity would give the Pelta class a very long lifespan with the potential for future upgrade packages. The Strike class version of the Pelta was given more thrusters to give it more maneuverability and speed, and it was also given increased armored plating for more defenses, and turbo lasers were also added on board as well. Technically speaking, the Pelta class could have been used as a picket or escort vessel during the conflict. More commonly, though, it was used to transport goods and manpower around the galaxy. It was kind of like a general use logistics vessel. The Pelta class medical frigate remained one of the more popular variants of this vessel. As the conflict spread from Geonosis to many Outer Rim worlds, the Pelta class's ability to serve as a mobile hospital became indispensable. Many clones who would have otherwise died because of a lack of life-saving equipment in the field can quickly be transferred to one of these ships and stabilized thanks to the state-of-the-art medical facilities on board, and of course all of the medical personnel stationed there as well. And so while this small ship wasn't taking the fight directly to the Separatists like the Venator class Star Destroyer was, it was doing extremely important background work, rescuing civilians and healing the wounded. It was preserving life so that after the war there was still something left to rebuild. When Cham Syndulla and a small Republic garrison were about to be overrun on Ryloth, it was also a group of Pelta class frigates that broke through with foods and supplies. When the garrison on Christophsis was on the verge of surrendering to the Separatist invasion, it was again the Pelta class frigate that delivered the munitions and reinforcements needed to hold the planet. And when the Separatist supership, the Malevolence, targeted and threatened to destroy the Haven class medical station known as the Kalita Shoals Medical Center, it was dozens of Pelta class medical frigates that swarmed the station and evacuated wounded clones and medical personnel. By the time the war had ended, the Pelta class frigate had become a legend because of its exploits. Now, interestingly enough, after the Clone Wars ended, the Pelta class frigate declined in popularity. Quad Drive Yards switched their focus on fulfilling massive contracts from the Empire for new Star Destroyers and Dreadnoughts. Tiny little frigates like the Pelta class were no longer in such huge demand. But the Pelta class found a new life in retirement, and this was thanks to kind of the modularity of the ship, and because the ship was so associated with relief missions. And so, like, when the Empire took over, the Pelta class was just reassigned as a hospital ship, which meant that the rebels could buy these vessels, whereas they couldn't get other types of corvettes and frigates that were labeled as warships. And so the Pelta class frigates would serve alongside other, civilian ships like the diplomatic Corellian corvette known as the CR-90, and of course the transport ship known as the Hammerhead corvette. The Rebellion would develop two types of Pelta class frigates, an assault variant and a command variant. The goal here was to turn these small picket ships into capital ships. Additional turbo lasers were placed on board alongside even more point defense weapons, and there's also upgraded deflector shields. The Pelta class assault and command variant were also given external docking points for A-wings to latch onto. At the same time, a ventral hangar bay would replace the cargo bay and ramp that was used to deliver supplies when the Pelta was functioning more like a freighter. In total, a Pelta class could serve as a base for up to 8 A-wings, which is quite a formidable complement for a ship of this size. The famous rebel unit known as Phoenix Cell actually once called the Pelta class frigate their main flagship. On these command variants, the original bridge, which was placed towards the aft of the vessel on a raised tower, was turned into a comm center, whereas the actual bridge was moved to the front of the ship, sort of like what we see on a CR-90. But of course, as the Rebel Alliance grew in size, the Pelta class frigate became too small to really serve as a command vessel. But there's really something fitting about the Alliance to restore the Republic, using essentially relief and aid vessels from the Republic era to fight tyranny, to fight the Empire. It's almost like the Rebellion was going back to the roots of what made the Republic so vibrant and strong in the first place. This emphasis on preserving sentient life no matter where you go. Because at the end of the day, all of these war machines, these giant missiles, turbo lasers, they're all designed for one thing, and that is to serve the people and make sure that their lives are protected. And no ship better represents that calling than the Pelta Class Frigate. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy. I'll see you next time.